Welcome to Amusing Jews, where we celebrate Jewish contributors and contributions to American popular culture. I'm Jonathan Friedmann.
And I'm Joey Angelfield.
Producer engineer Mike Tomren is working somewhere behind the scenes. Amusing Jews is a project of Adat Chaverim, Congregation for Humanistic Judaism, the Kul Shul Jewish Cultural Community, and Atheists United Studios. Joey, I don't know about you, but I've spent much of my life, much more than I'm probably aware of, watching cartoons. Beyond the art, design, action, comedy, fantasy, characters, theme songs, and incidental music, what has always attracted me to animation is the voices. In my personal pantheon of amusing Jews, Mel Blanc, the man of 1,000 voices, the son of an immigrant Jewish mother who voiced Bugs Bunny, Daffy Duck, Porky Pig, and so many others, sits somewhere near the top. Maybe he even hovers above the pantheon, if such a thing is even possible. At an early age, I developed a knack for doing cartoony voices. It's not something I've pursued professionally or even amateurly, but in my imagination, it would be my dream job. There must be a connection between voice acting and having a musical ear, which is something I've also got and something our guest has in abundance.
Rena Strober was the voice of Esmeraude, a member of the villainous Black Moon clan on the anime series Sailor Moon. Her Broadway credits include the role of Cosette in Les Mis and a national tour of Fiddler on the Roof, playing Tevye's oldest daughter, Tzeitel. Recent television credits include characters on the Netflix animated series Dogs in Space. Rena is currently on the circuit promoting a film adaptation of her one-woman show, Spaghetti and Matzo Balls, about how she rediscovered her Jewish roots from the Catskills to Broadway to an infamous Italian restaurant in Spanish Harlem. Rena Strober, welcome to Amusing Jews.
Thank you. I just want to hear both of you talk for a while. There's such cool stuff. Thank you for having me.
So when Jonathan told me that we were going to be interviewing you, my wife overheard it and said, wait a second, I know that name from the credits of Sailor Moon. So I don't know if you'd be willing to say a little bit more. Jonathan and I are both kind of interested in voice acting, voice recording. Maybe we're kind of dreaming about some kind of work like that. So what's it like? Is that sort of the place where you could wear pajama pants before the Zoom world sort of put us in that whole mindset of, it doesn't matter what you wear to work?
Yeah, I definitely first gravitated towards it because I was working on Broadway and there was so much makeup and wigs and costumes. But during the day, I would get to go record and it didn't matter what I wore, what I looked like. And I loved that. But I want to bring something up that Jonathan said about a musical ear helping in the voiceover world. The reason I was cast as Esmeraude is she has an infamous laugh. And that's how everybody knows her, this crazy high laugh. And the woman who was directing it, Susie, knew me as a singer. And she thought, oh, I know you're a soprano. I know you have a high range. Could you do that laugh? And because of my vocal training as a singer, I was able to do it. And that was my in for that role. I'd never played a villain before. It's the best role to play. But it was my musical ability that got me that role. And the same with Fire Emblem. If anyone plays the Fire Emblem series, I do Azora, and she's known as I sing the theme song, and her power is her voice. So because I was a singer, that's why I was cast as Azora. And then because the fans loved her, I got to speak, which was always nice to be able to talk. But my musical knowledge has definitely helped with many of the roles. And the same with Pen Zero. I was a singer on Pen Zero. Dogs in Space, I didn't sing, but I sing on a lot of things. And then a lot of times if it's a celebrity doing the speaking, but they can't sing and there's a song, I'll go sing for them.
Oh, that old trick.
Yes, Little 42nd Street.
So Rena, I think that most people are familiar with most forms of acting that happen in front of a camera or in front of an audience. We sort of understand the basics of how that might play out. Voice acting is a completely different animal, as it were. I wonder if you could take us through the process of how the voice syncs up with the characters and all the behind the scenes stuff, if you can share and shed any light on that.
Yeah, Voice acting is acting. I mean, you're doing the same thing. You're understanding the character, but you have to do so much more because you were not able to show your face or your body. And just a quick story, when I moved to LA in 2010, I had been friends with Russi Taylor. Again, another incredible, she's the voice of Minnie Mouse. And Russi and Wayne Allwine, and Wayne was the voice of Mickey Mouse, were married and in love. And we had been friends through Fiddler on the Roof. She had seen me, and I begged her to take me to work one day here in LA to watch her record. I forget what show it was. She did Minnie Mouse, but she also did The Simpsons. You've heard this woman's voice. And I watched these actors with their faces were huge, their arms were outstretched, because for the first 10 years of my voiceover career, I kept very still behind the microphone. I didn't move too much. But then the more I studied Russi and Tom Kinney, who's the voice of SpongeBob, and a lot of these great people who I was able to watch work, they're big. And of course, you have to keep your head straight because you have to be on the mic or your engineer will scream at you. But it's so much fun. It's like getting to be in a preschool all day and you just have to be really big. You asked a really good question about syncing. I do a lot of dubbing. I dub a lot of Japanese stuff. When I'm lucky, there's no match. It's called matching the flap, where you have to match the voice or the flap of the mouth. And anyone who knows the beautiful Japanese language is something can be 2 seconds in Japanese, but it means 14 sentences in English. So it's very difficult. And you have to rely on good writers to translate it well. And you just become really good at it. I become very competitive with myself. My ear is very musical. So I hear it in beats. I'm like, ba, 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 ba. I hear it in a tempo. So that's a lot of the work. But if you're lucky, like with Dogs in Space, they didn't animate when I recorded. So I got to just have fun. And then they animated after the fact. So that's the best part. And then doing video games is so crazy. I'm paid to literally go, like you're paid to just make noises. Sometimes you're paid. Most of the time you're paid. But it's just playing, and it's so much fun.
And I know that you're infatuated with Muppets and Sesame Street. I remember the first time I met you, we bonded over Jim Henson and all that stuff. And you've done some projects related to that as well. Do you mind sharing a little bit about that?
First of all, I love that you talked about Mel Blanc, because I think he does hover above everyone. I listened to Mobituaries the other day, and it was about the female voiceover. I forget her name, but she talked a lot about Mel Blanc. And I don't think people realize the extent of what he did. So I grew up on Warner Brothers. I grew up on Bugs Bunny and Chuck Jones. But when it comes to Jim Henson, I'm looking at my desk. I have a Fozzie Lego. I have Scooter in front of me. There's a purity and a simplicity to the music of Sesame Street and to the messaging of Sesame Street that I've always loved. It's not complicated. And as an adult, I actually came back to it. I loved it as a kid, but I came back to the music as an adult. Because I loved singing, like I Don't Want to Live on the Moon, which is on both of my albums. And then a few years ago, I had a child. I don't know what I was thinking, but I had a kid. And I just kept thinking, I need to leave her something because I don't have any money to leave her. What can I leave her? And I thought, I'll put a CD together. And then I was like, what music would I want to leave my child? And there's only one type of music, and it's the original music of Sesame Street, which is Joe Raposo and Jeff Moss. Jeff Moss, who wrote I Don't Want to Live on the Moon. They were the original composers of Sesame Street. And then Jason Alexander recorded it with me, and French Stewart, and a choir of I used to work at a blind music school, so I had all my blind students come and sing on it. It's I think the purest music, and it's simple, and yeah, I just love it. I love having Muppets around me. And when you go back and watch, Jonathan, have you ever seen the outtakes of the Muppet movie? It's like an extra feature. They're like, they must be really stoned, because it's like Jim and the guy who plays Fozzie. Frank Oz. So they're sitting in a tree, and this is an outtake, and they're like, and Fozzie goes, I love being a bear in nature. And Kermit's like, Fozzie, you're not really a bear. And he's like, what? He's like, you're stuffing. Like they're messing around. What do you mean? There's a hand and there's a what? And like, they just are messing with each other, but there's this love of what they do. And speaking of like being faceless as a voice actor, they were faceless, Henson would be like in a box underneath they were just about bringing joy to people's lives. And I think that's the purest art form, when it's not about the artist, it's about, the art.
Yeah, it's something that I really appreciate about you, and something I wish I had a little bit more of myself, is this positivity that you exude, whether it's, I'm sure you have bad days and other spots, where positivity may not seem like the natural state of being, but whatever it is, you exude that positive energy in a way that I think, like you're saying, the Henson credo and the Henson kind of ethos, that all makes sense that you would be so wrapped up in that. And I admire it. You don't have to respond. I just want to say that I admire your positivity.
I appreciate that. I think part of it is due to the fact that I've gotten to do what I love, what I dreamed of. I've tried the whole office job once when I lived in New York City at YIVO, actually, which is like the Jewish library. And I had to go back to the same desk like 2 days in a row and sit there. And I was like, what's this? What? This is terrible. So I've gotten to play for a living, whether on stage or in a studio. I'm very lucky, very, very lucky, but I think it also helps.
Since you mentioned the stage, kind of wondering, as much as I'm loving the talk about voice work, would you mind sharing what was your favorite live action role between, your TV and Broadway credits?
Oh, can I tell you, I love being on stage. There's nothing more exciting than theater happening and then never happening in that way again. I love the impermanence. What's the word? Impermanence?
Yeah, it works.
The idea that the audience sees just that and it's gone. And then when I moved into television, I started to really panic because it's permanent, and I remember I was on site at a Disney Channel show for 4 years. And I remember being on set the first day, and every time I had a line, I opened up, I was like, I need to open my shoulders to the audience, because there was a live audience, and the director's like, there's 2 cameras behind you. Like, it's multicam. You don't have to turn around. And I was like, wait, what? What? Like, it was very confusing. But I love it. I love television. I like what it pays. I like the energy of it. But if I had to choose where to live out my days on the farm, it would probably be as close to a stage as possible.
It's interesting that you mentioned that, because I know making a recording of music as well, there's that sense that you're kind of fossilizing something that is spontaneous, something that is impermanent, as you're saying. And there is that kind of discomfort that I have as a musician as well doing that, because that's just one take of many, or, you're hypercritical probably of the final product. I guess you just have to get used to it.
Well, the thing with this Sesame Street music is I was very clear to my producers, there was an imperfectness to the Sesame Street recordings. I have albums all over my house. If you go back and listen, they're so not perfect. There's even the Muppets are flat. Frank Oz is flat. Their guest stars are flat. And I love that. I love it because the listener feels human. So when I recorded my album, the first thing I said was, I want to sing it straight through. I don't want to punch. And punching is when like you go in and you sing a few lines at a time to make it perfect. And I said, I don't want that. I need the recordings to be me singing from the beginning to the end, because in a live show, that's what it would be. And I wanted my kids, my choir that was there. And even when Jason was there, I kept reiterating, I didn't want it perfect. I didn't want it shiny. I didn't want it, because that wasn't the message of these songs. These songs were about, you're weird, you're different, awesome, So that was that album in which I was the EP of. But yeah, when I record for other people, I often don't listen back, because all I hear is like, I could have done that differently. You should have seen my face when I was singing that. I swear I was acting it.
Yeah, speaking of live and the old days of television, when things were live, I know that you had a wonderful, unique, very special opportunity to meet Sid Caesar of all people. If you don't mind sharing how that all came to be and the other old Jewish comedians you got to meet along the way.
And not just meet him, I was sort of by Sid's bedside for the last year of his life. Actually, from the day I met him, it was exactly a year to when he passed away. I have been in a lot of situations in life where it doesn't seem like I should be there. And one of them was I was a member of the Friars Club in New York, which is where all the old Jews would go. They coined the roasts. And I was a friar. I used to say I brought the average age down to 70. And when I moved to LA, I was doing this musical called When You're in Love, the Whole World is Jewish with Jason Alexander. He directed it. And in my bio, I was still such a proud New Yorker, still am. It said I was a member of the Friars Club. And these people came up to me afterwards and were like, we were members of the Friars Club here. And we're the caretakers for Sid Caesar. We've not brought people up to meet him, but there's something about you. Would you want to meet him? And I had been stalking him for years. Like I knew he went to Factor's Deli on the West Side on Wednesdays to eat lunch with his writer's room. And I used to show up and like have my little Sid's like Caesar's Hour book. And this was a man that I held to the highest place of comedy. I'm a Catskills girl. I grew up on Mel Brooks, and Sid he might have been Hashem level. I mean, it's controversial.
Yeah, well, he's like the grandfather of the grandfathers. I mean, he has this amazing pedigree and legacy.
Yeah. And so I met, so they brought me up to his house and he was in a bed and not very with it. I went up with Arthur Hiller, who directed Man of La Mancha and Love Story. And the guy that had brought me knew I was a singer and said, see what happens if you sing to him. I was like, okay. And I just started like, there's a somebody I'm longing to see. I hope that he, and Sid's eyes opened and his brows popped up and he started to sing along. And what proceeded was a year of me going up multiple times a week, singing with him. And as I sang, and this is music therapy, it's not something special to me, but it's the power of music. He was coming too. And then Mel Brooks would come on Fridays and he found me and was like, we heard that Sid is talking to you. We thought we lost our friend. Him and Carl Reiner were going up and they thought he was gone. And I said, no, he told me that when he held you out the window in Chicago and he told me this. And it was at a Passover Seder where Mel really like took me in and he kissed my forehead. I haven't washed this in 5 years. And it was a really powerful time of my life. I was in my my early 30s at the time. And Sid was in his 90s. And I learned so much from him. And we didn't talk about the industry. We talked about love and his wife who had passed away. And we talked about the news and wars and Mel. And I actually led the Passover Seder at his house. And yeah, it was just one of those moments again where I'm like, how did I get here? And I'm grateful, very grateful for it.
Do you remember who else was at the Passover Seder?
Theo Bickel, who had played my dad in Fiddler for a hot second. Lainey Kazan, Richard Lewis, Jack Carter. Oh, Jack Carter. Connie Stevens, who was gorgeous. Rabbi Jerry Cutler. I'm trying to think of who was around me. Arthur Hiller, Jeff Ross, who was the other young one, and Monty Hall, who I know that a lot of people love Monty because he was the Let's Make a Deal host, but his daughter is Joanna Gleason, who starred in Into the Woods in 1987. So all I wanted to know was like, tell me about Joanna Gleason. And Monty was beautifully Jewish. Sid was Jewish, but not very religious. But Monty had a real love of being Jewish and of prayers, and he would always do the Shechianu because we would have dinners at Sid's house, and he was always asking if he could do the Shechianu, and it was just so beautiful. So Monty Hall was definitely a highlight. Oh, and Mel Brooks, sorry, Malijah as we called him, Mel Brooks and Carl Reiner, Yeah,
That's quite a crowd.
it's crazy.
Did you know that Monty Hall officiated the first bark mitzvah, the bar mitzvah for a dog
Are you kidding?
in Hollywood in the 1950s? It was sort of a fundraiser, but he was the MC.
Who do you know whose bar mitzvah it was?
I don't know the dog's name, and I don't know the socialite's name either, but it was one of those things, a very Beverly Hills experience for sure.
So, Rena, really want to hear about this latest project of yours, Spaghetti and Matzo Balls. Jonathan keeps on telling me about it. It sounds amazing, and I feel like I'd be remiss if I don't get to hear a little bit about it before we're done with you.
So Spaghetti and Matzo Balls was an off-Broadway one-woman musical I had written back in 2006. And the show itself was a celebration of my life as a Jewish New Yorker and of my night singing in this restaurant called Rayo's in Spanish Harlem. And this was a well-known sort of mob hangout, politicians, celebrities, and I would sing there every week. And so my original production just mostly celebrated that place. But there was a very infamous incident that happened, a shooting. Two mobsters had gotten into an argument over my singing, and one ended up killing the other one because, I got a voice to die for. But I wasn't able to really explore that entire part of this story in the show back then because a lot of the key players were still around and they didn't want me talking about it. But fast forward to this past year, as we all emerge from the trauma of quarantine and just where the world is, I decided to revisit the story and take it back and create this short film version. It's still just me, but I sort of thought creatively around the cinematic idea of it, of how to address trauma, the mafia, gun violence, which is very prominent in the news right now, and then my own Jewish identity. So there's a lot of music, it's sort of making the festival circuit now. It might be on JLTV. We'll see what that is about, but I'm really, really proud of it. It's very honest. It's very raw, no holes barred, and it was scary to put out, but I'm very proud that I did it.
And I will say too that it's very amusing. Despite all of the heavy subject matter, you managed to make it touching, yet also light, yet also very deep, yet also kind of enjoyable, as much as an experience that you had can be considered enjoyable.
If Mel Brooks has taught me anything, and he has taught me everything, it's that if we don't laugh at our trauma wins. When I first met him at Sid's house, I said, "What's up with Hitler? Why?" And he said, "If we don't make fun of him, he wins." And so it's a very Jewish, it's part of our Jewish identity. That's where the Borscht Belt comics came from. We laugh in the face of devastation. And I'm so proud that I can do that. And make fun of myself and make fun of the situation. And that's how we take it back.
Well, I'm so glad that you were able to join us for this episode of Amusing Jews.
Amusing Jews. It's redundant, isn't it?
Some would say so.
We're all amusing.
And to our audience, now back to your regularly scheduled lives.